G'day guys, Dean from Blog for the Blood God here, and at time of recording I am the #1 ranked Chaos Space Marine player in the world, and as a result a lot of people ask me questions about the ITC, about the ranking system, about how these scores are generated and my thoughts on them. So what I wanted to do today is just do a quick video showcasing some of the challenges that I have with the ITC rankings and some of the proposed solutions, because as a whole, I'm not actually that big of a fan of the ITC rankings, despite the position that I hold within those rankings. So I thought, yeah, real quick video where I discuss some of the challenges that I have with the system, some of my proposed changes, and then I want to get a conversation going with you guys in the comments below to sort of hash this out and see if we can come up with some even better solutions, see if you guys agree with my challenges and those sorts of things. So with that being said, let's just jump straight into the video.
Blog for the Blood God.
G'day guys, let's get a bit of a conversation going about the ITC rankings system. Now this is a system that I'm acutely aware of. I'm currently, at time of recording, ranked the #1 Chaos Space Marines player in the world, so it's a system that I have a vested interest in being as accurate and as comprehensive as possible, and also as widespread and prestigious as possible. I want the ITC rankings to succeed, and I want it to be something that everybody loves and everybody uses. However, in my opinion, there are quite a few significant challenges with this system that kind of make it seem somewhat unimpressive. So I want to talk to you guys today about a few of the challenges that I have, a couple of the ideas that I have for solutions. Now, not every one of these challenges I have a good solution for. So I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments section about what you think about this system, whether or not you think I'm on the ball or if I'm a little bit off with some of my challenges or with some of my proposed solutions. And yeah, we'll just get a bit of a general conversation going about ITC rankings in the comments below. So I guess I'll kick off first with the faction-specific rankings, because like I said, currently the #1 of faction Chaos Space Marines in the world, so that's a logical place for me to start. And basically, my challenge with this is, there's several challenges I have with this. The first one is that basically it's a 12-month season, right? But midway through that season, it's entirely possible, if not probable, that that faction is going to experience significant changes, right? So this could be something as big as an entirely new codex, which is what happened to the Chaos Space Marines, or it could be something like a balanced data slate change that completely flips the faction on its head, like what happened to the Necrons recently. And basically my challenge here is that you're measuring the results achieved by players under one rule set, say the previous Chaos Space Marine Codex, against the results achieved by players with the new book and the new rule set, which is effectively a completely different army in everything other than name, you know? So it doesn't really make sense to me to compare those against each other. So for example, if you go with the old codex, which I did, and win a bunch of events and do really, really well, and nobody else is performing very well with that book, right? That's a serious achievement. That's something that you should be proud of. But then if halfway through the season, a new book comes out for your faction, and that book is OP as fuck, like it's really, really powerful. So then all of a sudden a whole bunch of people bandwagon jump onto that faction, people who are not dedicated players of that faction, but because it's just got this big glow up and it's so powerful, everybody jumps onto it, and then they all start winning like super mages and shit. And then all of a sudden you just get the blanket ripped out of underneath you because of the change in faction. That feels bad. That's going to suck, you know? And I just think that when a new book comes out, that should be set, you know, those results should be set. It's like, okay, the old codex, their rules, whoever was best at the time of the new book gets the fucking medal for being the best of that. And like this obviously comes from somewhat a place of self-serving, you know, opinion, because I'm currently the #1. Most of the results that I got were with the old book. I was #1 at the time of the new book being released. So I obviously don't want people to run out and take this new book and perform particularly well and dethrone me. But it also just comes from a place like, to use the Necron example, right? They didn't even get a new book. And this is where the whole setting it in stone when the book changes doesn't necessarily work, because they didn't even need to get a new book. They just got a Nephilim update where they're like, oh, they get awesome secondaries and they get core on everything. And all of a sudden it's like, without even receiving a new book, Necrons became one of the best factions overnight. And now there's a whole bunch of people doing really, really well with Necrons, even though they've never played the faction before in their life. And as a result, all of those hardcore Necron players that have been playing them for years and that have been playing them while they sucked, that have pushed to get to the top of that faction, now get instantly dethroned by those who bandwagon jump. So I think the fact that the 40k rule set is constantly changing, often in very dramatic ways, kind of means that the Best in Faction award is compromised. So my solution to this is that at the start of the season, you should have to pick a faction, and that's the only faction that you are eligible to receive Best in Faction for. So at the start of the season, you could go, I am a Chaos Space Marine player this season. And that doesn't mean you have to play Chaos Space Marines. You can run off and play whatever the fuck you want. But for the purposes of Best in Faction, you're only going to receive points for your Chaos Space Marine results. And if somebody else that picked fucking, I don't know, Orcs, if they picked Orcs as their faction, and then halfway through the season, Chaos Space Marines get a really, really powerful thing, then they go, cool, well, I want to play Chaos Space Marines because I want to win events. And it's like, okay, that's cool, but those results don't make you the best Chaos Space Marine player because you didn't select Chaos Space Marine at the start of the season. And I think that's the best way to do it, because that stops people from bandwagon jumping and stealing things from those who have been dedicated to that faction for a long time. There's obviously going to be some challenges with this as well, like if you have it set up this way and at the start of the season only 3 people decided to be GSC, well, it's going to be very easy for one person to just win best in GSC, and that's going to feel bad. Whereas if you know that at any stage somebody else could pick up GSC and start doing well, well then there's an incentive for you to continue crushing it all year, because you need to defend that title from potential bandwagon jumping. So it's obviously a very nuanced situation. I just think that the current Best in Faction doesn't really apply. The next challenge I have is the way that team events are scored. And basically my understanding of team events is that if you have it set so that you get points based off your results, individual results in a team, you would incentivize people to be a captain of a team. Fucking dickhead just tried to cut me off and then honked at me. Sorry. If you set it up so that you had individual results counting, then you would have a captain. You would result in captains who intentionally just pair themselves into good matchups every round, so that they can go undefeated, so that they'll get a really high score and a really high ITC score. So people would weaponize that to get higher rankings. So we obviously don't want that to be a situation. So the solution that they propose is that wherever your team places, that's what you get. You get the ITC rankings as per your team. The problem with that system is that you'll end up with people on a team who perform really bad that will score really high ITC points if their team performs really well. And that's also obviously something that you don't want to do. You don't want to have a situation where somebody's on a team, say it's a 5-man team event, 4 of their players absolutely crush it every round, but that 5th player, he gets good matchups, he's, got a decent list, but he's just bad and he just fucks everything up, and as a result he loses all of his games, and the team still performs really well overall, but this one individual player sucked, but he's going to get massive ITC points because of that. And that's obviously flawed as well. So I think the problem with the team system is that if you do it based off the individual, it's flawed, and if you do it based off of the team's results, it's flawed. So I think with that in mind, I've got 2 proposals for a solution here. One of them is that you just don't use team events. Maybe create a separate rankings system for those, but don't let team events contribute to somebody's overall ITC ranking. Just separate it out, because otherwise, you're going to hit one of these two problems potentially. So just go, cool, there's the ITC singles and then there's the ITC teams, and that way if you perform really well on your team, you'll be fine. If your team does really well, your team will have a really high placings, that sort of shit. The other solution is to have some kind of complex combination of the two, where it's like it's your individual placing and your team placing added together and then halved. So it's like if you're on a team that comes first but you lose every game, well, you get the ITC ranking place for coming first, but you also get the ITC ranking that you would have achieved for coming last. Add them together and then halve it, and you get the equivalent of a middle range kind of player. But if you're on a team where your team comes last, but you won every game because you just paired yourself into favorable matchups, well, then you get the singles coming first, but you get the team coming last. You add them together, split it in half, and then you get a sort of a mid-range thing. And the only way to get a higher ITC score under that system would be to be on a team that wins all of its games, and you also win all of your games. And then it's like, okay, well then maybe the reason that your team went so well is because of you. It's because you won all of your games, so you must be a good player, and therefore you get good ITC points. So I think that probably the second solution is the best one. It's probably just a little bit more complex, and I wouldn't know how to work out the exact ratio of it. You might want to do a 60-40 split and prioritize the way your team performs over how the individual performs. I'm not sure. But some kind of combination, I think, goes a long way to solving that. And also, obviously, I think ITC need to work on their transparency about this. They should have the formulas posted. This is exactly how we calculate our scores. Now, they may have them posted. I did have a look before posting, before recording this video, and I couldn't find them anywhere. And I tried really hard to find the algorithm that they use, how do they determine the points that you receive, because that leads into my next challenge, and that is that they've got this system where basically the larger the event, the more ITC points you'll receive. And this makes sense on face value, right? Because you're like, yeah, well, of course, it's way harder to win a fucking 500 player event than it is to win a 12 player event, right? But that's not necessarily always going to be true. So, for example, here in Melbourne or in Australia, we have a thing called Oz Masters, right? Which is basically an invite-only event where the top players in Australia, or the top players in each state, we do a state Masters and then we follow that up with an Australian Masters. And in that, only the top players in that area get invited. So you might have an event where the top 8 players in Australia are the only people attending the event, right? So that's an 8-player event. But it is absolutely fucking savage, and it would be so hard to win, because you're going to play 5 games. It might be 16 players, but either way, you're going to play 5 games, and every single one of those games is going to be against a person who's the best at what they do, So every game is going to feel like that top table end of an event game. So winning a 16-player event that's invite-only with the best players in your country, that's way more impressive than winning a 32-player event where none of those players are attending because, it's not, they're busy that weekend or, whatever. So none of those players are in attendance. So therefore, you're just beating average middle-tier sort of players. Which obviously, winning a 32-player event, that's still impressive, regardless of the number, regardless of the status of the people there. But I just think that if you have a stacked event with really high-ranked players in attendance, that has to be worth more. So what I would like to see is, instead of it just being the number of players at the event and then basing your score off of that, what it should be is the combined current ranking or ITC points of the people in attendance of the event. So that way, if you have a 16-player event, but it's the top 16 players, when you add their ITC scores together, you're going to get a huge score. Whereas if you have a 50-player event, but there's only like 1 or 2 high-ranked players, and the rest of them are all either new people or people that only attend 1 or 2 tournaments a year, you know, and therefore they're not very challenging opponents because they're not tuned and they're not experienced. Well, if you add all of their ITC scores together, it might actually be lower than that of the 16-player event. So, therefore, winning that event is actually worth less than winning the 16-player event. I think that solution should be relatively easy to implement, and it also means that, you know, going to those events, it actually matters who's there. You know, if there's a whole bunch of new people at events that don't really, you know, don't really play 40k much and therefore don't have a high ITC score, well, those people aren't going to make the event any more prestigious. The prestige of an event should be, for the purposes of ITC, it should be how hard is it to win that event. And it's harder to win an event with a stacked top end with really good quality players. That's way harder than winning an event where, you know, most of the players are pretty average. And especially because the bigger the event, the less likely you're going to run into one of those top players. Like if there's 16 players at an event that are all like absolute rock stars and they're the best of the best, and it's only a 16-player event, well then there's a 100% chance that you're going to run into these players. Whereas if it's a 5,000-player event, for example, then, you know, the probability of you running into one of those players is actually diminishingly small, and you would have to perform exceptionally well repeatedly in order to hit one of those people. So, and then obviously that means that it's not as prestigious because you're not taking down titans, you know. I also think an interesting other solution could be that your ITC score is based on your opponent's ITC scores. So winning an event, it doesn't matter the size of the event. It could be the combined ITC scores of your opponents is what determines the score that you receive for winning, you know. And that way it's sort of means that there's been plenty of situations that I've seen where somebody will win an event because they managed to dodge all the good players, right? So there might be somebody rocks up with knights, you know, and then there's a whole bunch of good players that bring lists that smash knights, and one really good player that brings a list that can't beat knights but can beat all of the other good players, right? And then what happens is this knight player rocks up and he dodges knights all event. I mean, he dodges all the good players, right? He just hit every time he wins, it's like a 78 to 81 point win, and all the good players are getting, you know, 98s to 100s, right? So he dodges them, he keeps winning his games, but not big wins. Then all the good players end up getting taken out by that one really good player who has a list designed to beat all of the other good players, right? And as a result, all the other good players eventually getting a loss, and therefore they end up in the loser bracket, and therefore this knight player continues to dodge them all event. And then you get to the final game, round 5, and this top tier player is now versing the knight player. And that knight player happens to have a massive list advantage against that top tier player, and therefore he beats that one top tier player, and that knight player now wins the event, even though he only played one top tier player. Whereas that guy who he just beat had to beat every other top tier player to keep in that position. So, like, you tell me, what's more impressive, you know? The guy who was spending the entire weekend defending that top spot and smashing all of his opponents and smashing some of the best players in the world, like destroying them, but then he gets beaten by a bad matchup at the end? Is that more impressive? Or is the guy who run a off-meta list that was able to spend his whole weekend dodging top-tier players and never really faced any serious adversity and then he happened to get a good matchup into the final round and just win, you know. Like, I'm not trying to discredit that. That's obviously still very impressive, and it also shows, you know, if it was intentionally done, like if he intentionally ran that off-meta list because he knew that, you know, he would be able to dodge the top players by getting small wins, and you know, if that was all intentional, then that's all very good strategy, and credit to them. But I just feel that it's more impressive if you're able to beat multiple top-tier players and then win the event. So perhaps the best system would be one where you know, maybe every time you beat somebody, you get fucking 10% of their ITC score, you know, is what you achieve. So that way beating good players is more valuable than beating the weaker players. Something like that could be really powerful and really good. You know, I don't know. I just feel like this current system has a few holes in it. It could use a little bit of a tune-up. It's obviously very good bones. It's very good, you know, system. And I'm so glad that we have a system that's been so widely adopted. But I just feel like it's lacking a little bit. It's got a few holes in it that we could plug. And I think we've got some reasonable solutions for them as outlined here. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think I'm over exaggerating here? Do you think that my analysis of this system being faulty is justified, or do you think I'm sort of blowing it out of proportion a little bit? Would you support my proposed changes? Yeah, let me know what you guys think. I'm very keen to have this conversation. Obviously, I'm not an expert in ITC rankings. I just have some opinions, some thoughts, and I thought I'd share those with you. And yeah, let's get a conversation going, and I'll talk to you guys in the comments below. Cheers, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Alrighty guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please make sure you fill that comment section below. Part of the idea of this channel is I want to be having an ongoing dialogue with you. I don't want to just spew my opinions. I want to have an ongoing dialogue where we hash these things out in the comment section. And I'm sure that you've probably got some better solutions than what I proposed. You've probably got some other challenges that maybe I didn't cover or I didn't address. So let's get a conversation going in the comments section below and see if we can come up with some solutions as a community. Also, if you did like, make sure you hit the subscribe, the fucking notification bell, all of that good shit. Give the video a thumbs up. It really helps the algorithm, and it helps me sort of continue to grow this channel and grow as a brand. And if you really want to supercharge that effort to help me grow, then head over to our Patreon. There's a few different tiers, but basically you're going to get access to a Discord server where we talk about potential future videos. You get input on that. You get one-on-one coaching with me. You get list advice. You get all of that sort of stuff as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, or if you just want to show support for the channel, head over to Patreon. That's a great place to do it. I really appreciate all of those who help out on Patreon. It goes a long way to helping me get better equipment, better lighting, better microphones. I'm going to continue to grow. I have no plans on stopping anytime soon. So all of your support goes a long way to making sure that I can make that a reality and make this the best chaos channel that is on the internet. So thank you very much for your support. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Walk for the Blood God.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.
Do your objective markers ever get lost behind terrain or other models and become difficult to see? Do they ever get bumped and accidentally moved during a game? And do they ever spark arguments about distances? Well, not anymore. Introducing the Blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers. Made from the same material as astronaut suits, or maybe military equipment, or probably neither of those things, this 2mm thick neoprene synthetic rubber is tear resistant, water resistant, and is designed to last. But that's not all. The Blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers come in a variety of different designs and styles to suit any faction represented in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. These objective markers are a perfect gift for yourself or a friend, and are a perfect way to flex and show your opponent that not only are you a smarter, cooler, and better 40k player than them, but you also have more disposable income than they do. For the low price of $25, you'll get not one, not two, but 6 neoprene objective markers, perfectly designed for 9th edition Warhammer 40k. But wait, there's more. For a limited time only, people who sign up on Patreon to support Blog for the Blood God as a Skull Champion tier $5 per month member will gain access to a custom design service where I will design a unique logo to support their gaming club, like the one I did to the left here for the Potato Farmers local gaming club here in Melbourne. Follow the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today.